Chapter 6. A week passed since Don had spoken with his aunt. He still couldn't believe she'd been in contact with his father all these years. Why? Aunt Cynthia said it was because Stephen had wanted to know how Don was doing, but Don couldn't help feeling that there was more to it than that. Were the two adults seeing each other? Cynthia had said they'd only talked on the phone, but perhaps they rendezvoused every now and then. Don didn't know how to find Stephen other than to hire another PI. He thought about hiring the same one who'd found Ethan, but doing so would be risky after Ethan's death. Feeling helpless, Don buried himself in his writing. He was more than halfway done with the manuscript, yet he had no idea what it was about anymore. He just let his fingers do the typing. He decided he would read it once he was finished with the current chapter. He was almost afraid of what he would discover this time. He and Monica grew distant the more he worked on his writing. He barely paid attention to his surroundings anymore. He could feel the distance between him and his wife, but when it came to actually acknowledging it, he simply couldn't find the willpower. It felt like a mental block that he just couldn't get past, and it was frustrating. Everything was frustrating. Monica begged him to stop writing for one whole day. He said okay, but regretted it later on. His fingers itched for the keyboard. He felt compelled to get the story out, and that he would die if he held it in any longer. Whenever Monica wasn't looking, Don wrote in a notebook so he could transcribe later. He was cheating, but what she didn't know wouldn't hurt her. And what he didn't know was that she'd seen him writing that day. She didn't tell him until they went to bed that night. "You just couldn't stop for one fucking day," she chastised. "I write for a living, Monica, and I'm on a roll. I don't see anything wrong with that. And the more I write, the faster I'll finish. I would think that would be a good thing." "I don't like the way you get when you're writing. I don't think you even realize where you are when you're on a roll." "How do I get?" he asked, though he already knew. "You're not yourself." "Who am I then?" He was raising his voice but didn't care. "I don't know who you are, and that's the fucking problem." Monica wasn't raising her voice, but her words still had power. "Honey," he soothed, "I love writing, and I get paid to do it. I'm trying to finish as fast as I can so I can spend all my time with you and the kids." He leaned over and tried to kiss her, but she backed away. "I've read some of what you wrote," she said. Don's heart sped up. "You did?" His voice was choked. He didn't even know what he was writing anymore, and his wife had read it behind his back. "Yes, I did. I don't like it, Don. It's dark and scary." "It's supposed to be dark and scary." "You wrote the kids into the story. You're putting them into horrible situations." Don sighed. "Those are just characters in a book." "Who are you trying to fool? The whole story is about your life. The characters are based on people you know. Even I recognize them." "That's not true," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." Monica sounded angry again. "I'm learning more about you from your writing than I am from you." "The books aren't about me." "Yes, they are. I know they are." "How do you know?" "Because you wrote our recent vacation into it. You wrote the incident at your aunt's house into it. You even wrote your brother's death into it, except in the book it was cold-blooded murder." Don didn't remember killing off the main character's little brother. Christ, he really should have read what he'd written. "Don, look at me." He did. "Did you murder Ethan, or was it self-defense, like you said?" Don couldn't answer, or she would leave him. She would pack her bags and demand a divorce and leave him. "It was murder," he whispered. Instead of replying with words, Monica got up and left the room. For the next 2 days, she didn't speak to or look at Dawn whenever they crossed paths. She took on more shifts at the hospital so she wouldn't have to spend as much time at home. As much as that hurt Dawn, he felt it was more unfair to the kids. Dawn eventually migrated to the couch at night without Monica asking him to. Since she wasn't speaking to him, he continued to work on the manuscript. He still didn't bother to read it and simply let his fingers do the typing. He was getting to a point where he didn't care what he wrote, just as long as he was writing. If he didn't write, he ended up sleeping poorly at night, or his mind would race during the day and he wouldn't be able to concentrate. A month after the argument with Monica, Dawn's agent called. Dawn had been sitting at his computer, winding down from a few hours of continuous writing. He wasn't sure, but it felt like he'd finished the manuscript. He told his agent that much, and they planned to meet for lunch that week. He printed out all 700 pages of the manuscript but didn't read any of it. Truth be told, he was terrified of it. Monica had said that it was dark and scary, and Dawn's agent loved that stuff. Let Stan read it and share his thoughts. Dawn just hoped the grammatical errors were kept to a minimum. Stan McCloskey flew in from New York days later, and Dawn met him at the nicest restaurant around. Monica seemed fine staying with the kids as long as Dawn wasn't there, apparently. He felt a little self-conscious carrying the large manuscript box into the restaurant, but it couldn't be helped. Stan, a short man with a brown perm, noticed his client as well as the box. His jaw dropped. "My God, Donovan," he said as Dawn joined him at the table. "How many pages?" 700. "How many words?" 200,000, give or take a few hundred words. "That's twice as long as the last book. Inspiration struck?" "I couldn't stop writing," he replied. The meaning was lost on his agent, however. "Gimme," Stan said as he reached over the table like a child wanting his favorite toy. Dawn handed the box to him. He wasn't as enthusiastic as his agent. Instead, he was tired and depressed. Stan seemed to notice. "What's wrong with you?" "Monica and I are fighting." "Uh-oh. I know what that's like. Just ask my 4 ex-wives." Dawn laughed automatically. He'd heard that joke so many times and never found it funny, but he didn't want to be a bastard either. "So, I guess it wouldn't be a good idea to ask you for advice?" "It wouldn't be prudent, no." Stan glanced from the box atop the table to Dawn. "It doesn't have anything to do with that, does it?" "It has almost everything to do with that, Stan." "Did she read it?" "Some of it. She said it was too dark and scary." "Sounds perfect to me," Stan said as he took a sip of his beer. "Is that all you're fighting about?" "No." "Neither one of you has been unfaithful?" "No. I wish that's all it was. It would be simpler." Stan smiled. "Do you still love her?" Dawn looked at him. "With all my heart." "Then tell her that. Whatever is wrong, you can work through it if you have love in your hearts." "Then why do you have 4 ex-wives?" "Leave it to me to meet the only 4 women in the world without hearts." Dawn laughed automatically again. He'd heard that one a few times as well. Stan called a few days later. "Hey, Dawn, I just finished reading the manuscript. Where's the rest of it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, it just trickles down near the end, but it doesn't have an ending." Dawn felt ashamed for not properly editing his work. He should have known it was incomplete, but he had been too afraid to see what he had created. "I'm pulling up the document now," he told his agent as he opened the file. He quickly read the last paragraph. It involved the main character, along with his son and nephew. He read the last sentence out loud. He killed the boys. Pretty grim, don't you think? Stan asked. I thought you liked grim, Dawn said absently, still staring at the screen. Not simply for the sake of being grim. Is this really how you want to end it? No, Dawn replied honestly, though his subconscious had written the story. I'll fix it and get back to you in a day or two. Unfortunately, Dawn found it impossible to change or even elaborate on the ending. He hadn't told Stan about Connor. If he had, the agent might have connected the dots and worried about his client's sanity. Dawn wouldn't be able to blame him. He murdered his son and nephew in the story. If Monica read that ending, there was no telling how she'd react. He had to change it. But how? He didn't even know the context. He would have to read the whole manuscript. He read straight from the monitor, not changing a thing. He skipped lunch and even dinner. He read well into the night when Monica watched him from their bed. He read until morning. His eyes hurt, but he barely noticed. He was haunted by the story he just finished. It contained events that recently happened to him, discovering his birth father was still alive, as well as events that had never occurred. He now understood the context of the ending. The main character's son and nephew had become consumed by the curse and had gone on a killing spree together. There had been no other choice but to kill them. The wonderful cure from the first book hadn't worked on them. It couldn't end that way. The boys in the story hadn't started killing until well into their teenage years. Did Dawn predict the future in this novel? Was Jordan cursed, and if so, would the curse take hold of the boys soon? They were almost 6. The boys in the story changed when they were 15. Dawn decided to worry about that later and work on the ending now. Stan loved the new ending, though Dawn couldn't quite wrap his head around it. In the first book, a serum had cured the characters of the curse. In the sequel, Dawn found that he had written that the very serum proved merely a temporary fix, resulting in one of the characters, the youngest brother, reverting to his monstrous state. Unable to come up with anything new, Dawn simply concocted another, better serum for the younger boys. Everyone was curse-free and happy, except for Dawn. The new ending just felt so false to him. He hated Deus Ex Machinas. He actually liked the original better, even if it resulted in the deaths of the boys. It was just more honest, if not more horrific. Things with Monica only grew worse. Now that he'd finished writing, he'd hoped to spend more time with her and repair their marriage. She only seemed to grow more distant the harder he tried. He considered himself truly lucky that Monica hadn't gone to the police about Ethan's death. Dawn wouldn't have blamed her had she turned him in. He didn't deserve her. Dawn was starting to realize how Monica felt when he had been distant during his writing. Even when they were in the same house, it felt like they were in different states. Whenever he spoke to her, she gave the bare minimum of a reply. One day, while the kids were asleep in their rooms, Dawn and Monica sat at opposite ends of the couch, looking at the TV. Neither were watching it. Dawn reached for the remote and turned it off. Monica looked at him a moment before he started kissing her. She let him for a while, but then she pushed him away. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly, wiping her lips dry. "Can't do what?" "I can't keep pretending everything is normal between us when it isn't. I can't, Donovan." She sounded on the verge of tears. "What isn't okay?" he asked. "I'm done writing. You have me all to yourself." She shook her head. "It's not about the writing. It's about what you did to your brother." "What do you want me to do?" he asked. You want me to turn myself in to the police? No, I want out. What? I want a divorce. The words came out strained, as if she couldn't bear to say them. Why? Dawn asked, just as strained. She looked at him, her eyes red and watery. I still love you, but I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of my own child. Jordan? Why are you afraid of him? Dawn could barely hear his own words. They came out in a whisper now. I'm afraid he'll turn into a monster. That's ridiculous. I read your manuscript, remember? I read the horrible things those kids did. Will Connor and Jordan turn into them? How much of it had she read? Did she read the original ending? Let the answer be no. If there was a God, the answer would be no. I've been having nightmares, Monica went on. Those nightmares have been getting worse. They're just nightmares, honey. You can't let them ruin your life, our marriage. I've been having them every night for a month. That caught Dawn off guard. What happens in the nightmares? Monica took a deep breath. I'm pregnant with Jordan, and I find you crouched at the end of the driveway on all fours like a dog. I go to you, and then you kill me and the baby. Well, that was different. Honey, Dawn said, I would never hurt you or Jordan. I know you would never willingly hurt us, she replied. Dawn understood the implication. You're afraid of me, aren't you? I'm afraid of our future together, she said. I remember when you didn't scare so easily. Monica suddenly looked very angry. Don't even sit there and try to judge me. I don't know how to handle this situation. I didn't know what I was getting into before I married you. The wind had been taken out of Dawn's sails. He hadn't told her anything of the curse before they married. She had been thrown in, unprepared. It wasn't fair to her. So, he said, what do you want to do? She sighed. We just need some time apart. Just give me some time. You got it, he said reluctantly.